Is it Elton John tonight? Yes, tonight. I asked him if he wanted to come to the concert tomorrow. He said he might come. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to our concert. Sofya Gulyak is our soloist this evening and tomorrow. We met just before we've worked once before. We met just before the pandemic. It was like 3 or 4 months, wasn't it?
It was April 19.
April? Right, oh, so a little more than that. I was guest conducting in Mexico and you were guest playing in Mexico. And today, actually, we were talking, we had lunch together about I was going to say the trials, I shouldn't say trials and tribulations of playing in different places. It's a privilege, but it actually does bring up quite a few crazy things do happen on the road. And I thought maybe, I mean, you've traveled so much. And also I wanted to talk a little bit about playing different pianos in different places. Yeah. But maybe just playing in different, you played in almost every continent, perhaps except for Australia, I don't know.
Once.
Once, so everywhere.
Melbourne, yeah.
I mean, can you tell us a little bit about the challenges of, going to different places and,
Well, it's always...
Is it working?
Is it working? Yeah. It's always very interesting to see something new. Actually, well, before the pandemic, I was even thinking this way, like, I should really go as a tourist somewhere because I will place in this place somewhere in the future. This kind of profit. But, well, it's not right, probably. Yes, I played in different places, different continents, probably all continents.
Really all
yes, and of course some places are perfectly organized and it's just perfect, like Japan. It's just, I think they calculate each each small thing. It's so organized. It's just whatever you want is ready, and always many people following you and help you. Or some place completely disorganized,
And we've both been to different times to Vietnam.
No, I haven't played in Vietnam.
Oh, you haven't played in Philippines? You played.
Philippines, yes.
I'm thinking of maybe the climate. As you may know, Southeast Asia is even, all year it's very, very hot. Very, very hot and very, very humid. And when I conducted there once, the hall was beautiful from the outside, very beautiful. There's an opera house in Saigon, in Ho Chi Minh City. But the inside was a different story, including air conditioning not working, well, working a tiny bit. And you had the same experience, right? Yes,
in China I was fighting for air conditioning because it was just unbearable to play in these conditions.
And they did actually turn it up once you really put your foot
humidity.
down. Yeah.
Well, not completely.
And how about the audiences? Like, for instance, in China, we've had similar experiences.
At some places like Beijing, Shanghai, Chengdu, when it was a special festival, piano festival, so most of the audience were musicians themselves, and it was okay. They were attentive, respectful, but in some places it could be absolutely crazy. Like people could speak, they can use their mobile phones, they can even. Children, they can run around. I know the story I forgot to tell you from one friend of mine, not my friend, but from the pianist I know. He told me that story that he was playing 12 Etudes by Chopin, Opus 10, and there were kids somewhere in less than front rows. And he said, during Etude number 4 and number 5, they started fighting. And then their fathers came and they started to somehow try to calm down the situation. And all this was during concert. It was happening while he was playing, and a very difficult program. Gosh, Chopin Etudes.
Yeah. I don't know how you keep the concentration. I mean,
I don't know.
It's bad enough for me, but usually I have the back to the audience, and it's a little less. You can focus a little bit more, and of course, it's a different job anyway. But well, this is supposed to be about you. I'm going to tell this story. One time in China, I did a concert, and the next day we played in such a big auditorium. It was more like an arena than anything else. And the audience was way back, and they were on pews, you know, not really seats, and they were quite far back. And then I noticed in the second piece of the first piece was a little overture, was okay. Second piece was Brahms' Violin Concerto. And during the first movement, it suddenly became, I became aware of this sort of increasing wave of sound. It was just getting more, louder and louder and louder once I became aware of it. And suddenly I realized that everyone was on their phone. They were literally talking on their phone. And so at the end of that movement, and you had the same experience, right? Yes. I actually turned to the first cellist who happens to speak fluent English and said, I'm really sorry about this, but you're going to have to tell them to shut up, you know? Which he did, I think, very politely, and they did, and then sort of towards the end of the last piece, it began to build up again. And I'm not really trying to make fun. I mean, it's obviously a different culture, but it is an amazing experience and really very distracting, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I had worse because when I played actually this piece, Tchaikovsky #1 in China, for one event, big festival, big piano festival with orchestra, and people were recording the beginning, and then they were playing it right away while I was playing. So, and I heard the beginning of my playing just from somebody's phone. Yes, I mean, you know, it's normal there probably, but I mean, I don't want to criticize. I like these countries. They're great people, actually, I met. And the huge interest for classical music, I think it's just, it just needs time, probably, to develop, to get used to it.
So
it depends. It depends. But air conditioning is a serious problem in certain places.
So, you know, we've had, obviously, a lot of guests before, and with pianists, you know, when there's a violinist or a clarinetist or whatever, they have their own instrument, and of course they have to acclimatize with their own instrument, but it is their own instrument at least.
Yes.
So with you, what about the challenge of coming to a new piano every time?
It's not easy, of course.
Yeah,
you have to deal with what you have. If there is a good piano technician, you can talk to him or to her.
Like here, in fact, you've had a good experience, right?
Yes. Yeah. And the important thing that they could understand exactly what you mean, what is the feeling like. Because the piano is changing also. I was just practicing, and I'm sure the concert with audience, it will be different again. Yeah. So the feeling is always different when you rehearse and when you play, even on the same piano. So imagine if you change instruments every day or every, I don't know, whenever you're performing. But the important thing is there is a decent piano. You know, like great pianist Sviatoslav Richter was saying, his famous phrase, there are no bad pianos, there are bad pianists. I mean, you can... And he even used to play on uprights. He was giving concert during Second World War for the soldiers, and he was playing uprights. And you know, I mean, you can still do some good things, even on a not such a good instrument, but it's better if it's good.
Of course. And in fact, so Sofya played with me last week in Fairfax, Virginia, and you know, completely different piano with completely different challenges, right?
Yes,
so it's the way it is.
You have to adjust and just...
what's that? We're okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about the piece, the Tchaikovsky, your experience? Would you like to ask? Yes, I mean, tell us the challenges for you and what you think of the piece. And
well, I think this piece, as I said even last time at our outreach event, that I think everyone in their lives just once at least heard that beginning, the most famous, beautiful melody, and but it's not a pop piece, you know, because sometimes there are like certain pieces like this concerto or the third piano concerto by Rachmaninoff for something, I don't know what is the most famous one. Or like Tchaikovsky, I don't know, Swan Lake, or these melodies could be like Sleeping Beauty, like everybody heard it, but it shouldn't become like pop piece anyway. Even if it's very famous, there is still a lot of insightful moments. And I think, as we know, Tchaikovsky was quite an unhappy guy. He had to cope many complicated situations, let's say. And I think there is everything in this music. As I said, there is a lot of hope, there is a lot of suffer and personal tragedy. And there is also, as I said, some picturesque moments like second and third movement. He was influenced by many, and we have to remember about his operas. It's all very related. Operas like the Dame of
Queen of Spades.
Queen of Spades, and then of course Evgeny Onegin. It's very much. I think it's the period of Evgeny Onegin. It's more or less the same, and you can just feel, some winter morning, like in the second movement.
Yeah.
It's a bit of snow, which happens a lot here. Yeah. So just this very sun and snow and this nice feeling. Yeah. Or I don't know, or like dancing somewhere. And first movement, of course, it's a very, very. I think it's a very personal thing.
Yes, so
it's the dramatic center of the piece.
Yeah, huge movement, and
yes.
It's such a popular piece that, but you shouldn't forget that the structure of the thing is actually quite different from others, because it has, all these concertos. Well, almost all of them have big cadenzas for the passages for the solo alone, but the first movement of this has a big fat one towards the end, but it has two others.
Two others, yeah.
So it's really, you have a story to tell.
Yes, it's a very new thing, and even in romantic piano concerto, when they became more free in terms of form of the piece, but still it's very, very new and very innovative, I would say,
I agree
for
with
that
you.
time.
Yeah, it's so easy to not, as I was sort of repeating myself, it's so easy not to think about that because it's so famous, but that's true. And the last movement is a dance, right?
Yes, it is based on Ukrainian folk song.
Folk song, there we go.
But it's a very dancing character, definitely, very humorous.
Yeah. So I have to let you go to get ready, but can we have just 2 minutes? Questions for Sofya? Stunned silence.
When did you start studying piano? How old were you?
I was about 6, approximately, a bit less than 6.
And she's won lots of competitions. I mean, lots, right? Lots. One more? No more?
What did you do during the lockdown?
Oh, good.
I was relaxing a little bit sometimes. I was practicing. I was learning some new things, which I wanted to learn and never had time before. So I was just sleeping, enjoying, and relaxing a little bit. But after, I had a very busy 19 year, and then I thought in the end of the year, okay, next year, 2020, I have less stuff to do, and that's good, because at least I can concentrate on something else. And then I didn't expect it's going to be like that, of course. It's terrible. And then I thought, okay, 2020 it will finish somewhere, and then again 2021 again. So it was...
We all had a similar experience. So you just reminded me, just before you go, so when it closed down, I was about to give a concert in Fairfax with a pianist who just... So I picked him up from the airport. He came over from Paris, and I picked him up. We were going to have dinner together. We had dinner. Then I took him back to his hotel. I said, I'll see you first rehearsal tomorrow. Then the phone rings the next morning, and he says to me, Chris, I hate to tell you this, but I have to go back to France. I said, well, wait a minute. What are you talking about? I mean, it was just the beginning of the pandemic, but I thought, I sort of asked him to calm down and do you really? I mean, maybe this is an overreaction. And I sort of persuaded him maybe to talk to his agent or something to see if anything could be done. A couple of hours later, he contacts me again and says, I really have to get back. Because if he didn't go that day, he wouldn't get back because they were closing the airport. So he flew over. We didn't have a rehearsal. He flies back to Paris. So that concert was cancelled. But I thought, since the very beginning, he was supposed to come here the next week, just like what Sofya is doing this time. He was supposed to come here the next week, and the concert here was still on, as far as I knew. So maybe this little pandemic was going to last a few days. Yeah. And then, of course, he'd gone, so I thought, who can I get to play? It was the Brahms second piano concerto, a huge piece like the Tchaikovsky. I called up Sofya, and you said you were here, right?
I was in Tennessee.
You were in Tennessee,
Yeah.
and she
just
said she'd
finished.
step in.
Yeah.
Amazing, at the last minute, and then of course it was cancelled here.
And then you said, probably if we are not going to play in March, if we can play in May, probably it will come down.
Because again, maybe it'll last 2 months.
And then I said, I don't know how long for how long I'm stuck here. Maybe. So we just didn't know what will happen.
Yeah, we didn't.
It's life.
It is indeed. Well, we are, I think, at the end of it, I hope.
Yeah.
Thank you, but thank you so much for
very
talking
welcome.
to us, and I'll see you in a minute.
Okay.
Or two.
Thank you.
See you soon. So, ladies and gentlemen, just a little bit about the rest of the program. So, actually, the first piece on the program, very timely, I guess, in a sad sort of way, is called Fanfare for Democracy by a man called Stephenson. It actually is the piece which he wrote for President Biden's inauguration. You may recall there was a band piece at the beginning that's by him, and he decided to orchestrate it. And his project has been he wants to have it played in every state, if possible, over the next year or two. And I'm delighted to say that we're doing the first performance in the state of North Dakota. So that's the first. It's a fanfare. It lasts about 5 minutes, I think. And then we have, in the second half of the program, carrying on our theme, you may remember, of the season, which is first symphonies, what I regard as great first symphonies of the great composers. And Sibelius' first symphony is absolutely no exception. Obviously, perhaps not as well known as Brahms' first and Beethoven first, which we did the last couple of concerts. And Shostakovich first, by the way, which the concert, as you know, was cancelled because of the Omicron virus. But we have actually rescheduled it for May. So I hope you will stick around. After our finale next month, we are actually replaying the what we call the Masterworks 3 concert, where you'll hear Shostakovich's first symphony, which is another remarkable piece, written when he was only 18, 19 years old, which is kind of staggering. So Sibelius' first symphony was written, again, with what's going on in Ukraine right now, a timely reminder. It was written just at the turn of the century, I think 1899, and was premiered in 1900. And at that time, he's a Finnish composer. Finland at that time was called a duchy, archduchy. I'm not quite sure, but was an independent sort of Russia, but basically was, to all intents and purposes, kind of a province of the Russian Empire at the time. But they had autonomy. But during the last 10 years of the 19th century, the Tsar was getting more and more keen that he bring back Finland into the fold. And Sibelius was, at that time, had actually written Finlandia, which was supposed to be a kind of musical tribute, as it were, to Finland retaining its independence. I mean, he wasn't a particularly political guy, but his music, that piece was kind of inspired by the situation at the time. And so was this first symphony, written a little bit later. And in fact, the Finns did not fight. They, as it were, it was their way of pushing back was to show their independence in a cultural sort of way. And this symphony kind of burst onto the scene under those circumstances. So it's often compared with, and you'll hear it's a very lush, romantic symphony in the style of the great romantics, in a sense, like Tchaikovsky. And many people think it's really influenced by Tchaikovsky. And in fact, Sibelius loved the music of Tchaikovsky and was indeed inspired by him. But I think for those of you who know Tchaikovsky, I think you'll see how different, in fact, it is, that Sibelius has already really got his own genuine imprint on this music. And it has these sweeping themes like Tchaikovsky, but they are really Sibelian. he wrote 7 symphonies, and each one, curiously, this is not quite right, but basically is that each symphony became, the first one is about 40 minutes, the second one is about 40 minutes. Then they progressively become, I like to say, leaner and meaner. It's as though he's honing his craft symphonically throughout the 7. In fact, the last one is the shortest. It's only about 21 minutes, and it's only one movement. And I feel like it's almost he's trying to attain through his symphonic work the ideal symphony. And he kind of has the same process in mind. And you'll hear it even in this one. He has themes, which beautiful sweeping melodies that he presents to us. But he also likes to kind of break them down as though things are beginning to collapse and then rebuild them again. This really happens in the last movement. It is very, very dramatic and original at the time. The last movement you'll hear, it's clear as day, there's a huge tune and it seems to it does reach a climax. And it's as though the symphony is going to end with this big climax, and suddenly the bottom of the music kind of falls away. It's as though the building that he's built up begins to crumble. It's kind of weird. It's very dramatic. And then he kind of pulls it together again at the very end to sort of rebuild it to something even more impressive and stable. It's something he's like a sculptor with sound. And I think you'll hear this throughout. Also, the first movement of this piece, I don't want to give it away, but there's nothing like it before or since. And I think you'll be really struck by the opening. I don't really want to give it away, but just to say it's nothing like a big symphonic opening that you might have heard before. An amazing composer, and another enigmatic thing about him is the fact that he wrote these 7 symphonies across his career, but then he basically stopped writing. He was born in, 1865, I think, and lived to a very old age. He died in 1957, so he was in his 90s. He stopped composing. He didn't compose a thing for the last 35 to 40 years of his life, which is quite staggering, actually, when you think about what he's actually done before that. They say it's true that he tried to write an 8th, but I think he felt he'd said it all, and I think this goes along with this business of the music getting terser, more concrete, shorter and shorter till it stopped. And that was it. For the last 35 years, he didn't produce anything else. How many people have not heard this piece? Quite a few, I would imagine. Yeah. And how many of those people like romantic music? Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky. So I think you'll be thrilled with this piece, because you'll hear that stuff, but you'll also hear this new voice of this great composer. I hope you do enjoy it. Thank you, and I'll see you in a minute. Thank you. Thank you.